wish to speak? I am calling to order the meeting of the City of Salem Budget Committee for May 7th, 2025. Can the recorder please call the roll?
Member Belicheks.
Present.
Member Nishioka.
Here.
Member Brown.
Present.
Member Manville.
Here.
Member Vieira Brandel.
Present.
Member Tigan. Absent. Member Matthews.
Here.
Member Gwen.
Here.
Member Julie Hoy.
Here.
Member Nordyke. Absent. Member Varney.
Here.
Member Dixon.
Here.
Member Curtis.
Here.
Member Fuller.
Here.
Member Geyer.
Here.
Vice Chair Cohen.
Present.
Chair Allen.
Here. Thank you very much. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. We have some additions to the agenda, which includes a staff report. Could I have a motion to approve the additions to the agenda?
I move to approve the additions agenda.
Second.
We have a motion from Member Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. Is there any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, we are on to public testimony. You have correspondence from Christina Puentes regarding youth violence. You also have public testimony received May 6th and May 7th. We will begin tonight with public comment for those who are in attendance who have signed up. And I believe I don't believe we have anybody virtual. For members of the public who have signed up to testify, please provide your name and neighborhood or ward. You will then have 3 minutes to testify before the committee. Those speaking on behalf of a group will have 5. When the orange light starts flashing, 1 minute remains. When the red light appears, please end your testimony. All right, first up this evening is Kelsey Lamb. I see that you're in Ward 3. If you would please come.
Hello, Kelsey Lamb, Ward 3. I hope you all have had a chance to review my considerations from my written testimony. While programs that benefit staff and provide positive experience for the city are wonderful, we are in a time of crisis. We must consider reducing services to all non-essential areas, especially in departments mostly unaffected by the proposed cuts. By excluding areas that are not essential to city services from reductions, we are ignoring the severity of the budget problem. Cuts to staffing from police and fire have not been considered due to increases in overtime. However, a reduction in services provided, especially ones not directly tied with public safety, would result in more available manpower hours and less overtime, which would help save funds in the budget. A public library is one of the core services people expect a city to provide, and the cuts suggested don't just minimize these services, they completely remove many of the library's most beneficial services. Due to cuts we experienced last year and through recent years, we have reduced key programs that native Salemites associate with our city, like the first grade bookmobile. Gen X and Y Salem natives fondly have early memories of the exciting day the bookmobile visited their school. We used to have the capacity to visit every first grade classroom in the city, but now we only visit a portion of these classrooms every year as part of the reductions the library has already made, and it would be eliminated entirely with the proposed cuts. Connecting children to public libraries is vital to providing activities and books during the summer months when the summer slide occurs or the regression of children's knowledge during summer months. When most school-age children in Salem cannot read proficiently, early literacy and literacy-based services are more essential than ever. Childhood literacy is shown to indicate academic success later in life and lifelong learning, regardless of socioeconomic status. Additionally, the library provides essential connection to the digital world and combats the digital divide experienced by over 16% of Marion County residents without home internet access. Libraries provide services that enrich everyone, but these cuts would be truly catastrophic for those without access to services many of us take for granted. The library collections budget will increase 4% in the proposed budget, despite heavy cuts to library staffing. This budget is likely meant to outsource cataloging of library materials to our vendor because both catalogers at SPL would be laid off. This budget could have been reallocated to keep cataloging library staff to do this work. Outsourcing cataloging work is going to result in more mistakes. Our catalogers must fix pre-processed problems already, which is why we previously moved away from this model. In addition to the other areas I've suggested for review, I would suggest the collection budget of $440K on page 379 also be reconsidered for allocation to support library staff. I ask that members of the committee remember last year when we had this room filled with people from all backgrounds speaking in support of the library and writing hundreds of pages of testimony, written testimony for the library. Remember how you felt. Remember how some of you were moved to tears. Please remember how essential the library is to our community as you make decisions for the 2026 budget. Thank you.
Thank you. We also have Jessica, I believe it's Pointer. Oh, good, I'm 2 for 2.
Hello. I am Jess, and I live in Ward 1 in the wonderful Highland neighborhood. I want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territories of the Kalapuya and many sentient beings who came before. Thank you all for your time and efforts for showing up to do this work, city manager and city staff in particular. The scope of your work and dedication I have seen meeting after meeting after meeting colors me impressed. I've learned much from your examples. And I share a deep breath with you all, as it does not evade me that what I am about to say requires an ask of you for more of your expertise. I have decided to come here this evening to encourage you all to support and stand in solidarity with us doing the right thing. Budget committee members, the livability levy is uncertain. While there may be a considered version of the budget including an approval of the levy from the voters, that is not the budget on which you are focused, nor the one to which I speak. You can propose a budget that includes the costs for our public libraries to run at full capacity. You can propose a budget that includes the costs for our Center 50 Plus to run at full capacity. You can propose a budget that includes the costs for our parks and recreation areas to run at full capacity. You can propose a budget that includes the costs for our fire departments to have the roofs that they need and whatever else is required to have all 12 fire stations running at full capacity. You can propose a budget that includes the costs for our emergency services to run at full capacity, or even the costs of expanding these services to assist in areas we all know need more help. The police department and the role that policing has in our public safety will not be dismantled by this. Public safety comes in the form of preventative care as well, such as the complete funding of these community services that are often a point of connection before other needs arise. This is not a radical idea. This is a civil, practical, and ethical decision for the benefit of all Salem community members. We are in the moment where it must be intentionally decided to do this. You all get to be the ones to clearly outline these aspects of our city as necessary and ask our city council to do the same. I am eager to celebrate you doing so. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else present for public testimony? Seeing none. The next order of business on the agenda are approval of the April 30th, 2025 Budget Committee minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from April 30, 2025, City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee meeting.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Member Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. Is there any discussion? Yes, Member Curtis.
Thank you. I just have a correction. My name needs to be added to 7B and C as somebody who pontificated and asked questions during those two areas. And I know it's not a big deal, but somebody may be looking in 5 years to see if I actually participated in this committee, and I did. So I would just like to have that added to the minutes.
All right. Is any other comments or concerns with regards to the minutes? With that addition, all those in favor of the minutes, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? I see none. All right. So I just want to take a brief moment. There are no action items this evening, and before I ask Josh to go over the information items, just wanted to quickly go over what we have before us this evening. As you all know, we have had reports on all of the not service areas. Results area. You put the spotlight on and you can't think of a thing of the results areas. We're going to have, there are some information items. Then we're going to hear from the interim city manager, Krishna Naburi. In your agenda, there are 10 motions, or there are 10 areas that are that need motions. We would ask that you limit your the word that Member Curtis used was pontifications. If there are questions that still need to be asked, those can certainly be asked of staff. If there is additional information that is needed, we can certainly do that. We can certainly have discussions on motions. But we would try to stay away from just commenting for commenting's sake. I had something else there, and now it's escaping me. All right, we will, again, there is another meeting scheduled for next week if needed. But again, if there's not additional information either that is brought forth tonight or pertinent questions that they can't provide answers to tonight, there's probably no reason to move forward and delay it over for another week. Again, that would be the will of the committee, but let's just focus on the task at hand. And again, there may not be a need to continue if there isn't new information presented before us. So I'm going to move on to the information items. Josh, if you'd go ahead and walk us through A through E.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Josh Eggleston, Chief Financial Officer. We do have several information items for you this evening. The first is a summary of Budget Committee actions through April 30th. The second is responses to Budget Committee questions that you received last Friday. We have the Q3 financial reports for the City and Urban Renewal Agency, and just noting that those are coming to the Budget Committee. They'll also be going to City Council next Monday. And then we have additional responses to Budget Committee questions that you received this afternoon. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have on those items.
Are there any questions for the CFO? Seeing none. We'll move on now and give some time for Interim City Manager Namburi, who has who'd like to summarize where we are in our process.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening. I want to take a bit and reflect on the past 4 weeks and the work done by this budget committee. I'm personally impressed with the level of engagement and care you have shown for the process, and it's evident that each of you care and want to do the right thing for this community. And thank you for your hard work and your dedication, and most importantly, your commitment to Salem. So during the past 4 weeks, we have had honest and focused discussions about the city's programs and services. We have heard from the community. While there were tough conversations, your approach has remained respectful throughout, and I want to kind of commend for your professionalism through the process. When we started the process, we acknowledged a tough reality, which is we have a $13.8 million budget deficit in fiscal year 26. An additional $8.9 million in fiscal year 27. Now, and worse, we talked about the consequences of not acting on it now. I did emphasize my focus on balancing the budget while reflecting the community priorities and also preserving as many jobs as possible and as many services as possible. The budget direction wasn't shaped by the interest of one department, division, or a team. It was shaped by the data, service impacts, and the community priorities. So during the process, we have heard many questions from you, the community, our employees, and our media partners. I know these questions come from a place of care and a deep concern each of us have about what happens to Salem next. That is the question that everybody has. Now, as we approach your final deliberations, and I want to respond to a few of them, and I kind of looking at the themes of what we heard, and I felt like it's important that I do respond to those questions here. One of the questions was, why wasn't public safety impacted by these reductions? That is a valid question, because I did talk about a few weeks ago, I do recognize the importance of sharing that burden across the organization. But given the focus was on reducing operational costs, I could not recommend cutting public safety, especially at this current service levels of public safety. Reducing FTE for fire and police is not going to give us any cost savings. And so I kind of want to reiterate that. The other question we received was, how can this be okay for the community? The short answer on that is, it's not. Every service has a cost. And when a service is reduced or lost, we know that each of us feel that, the community feels it. And whether in safety, in crime, or in quality of life, we all depend on these services. And we have heard your frustration. I heard your frustration, your disappointment, and your very real concern. I know there was testimony today, a couple of testimonies about how can we make cuts to proactive services like library. And these are the services, and I think we all acknowledge that help prevent the need for reactive responses in the first place. And the libraries and parks are vital in prevention and offering safe spaces. So the cuts I have proposed for library and parks are painful, but they also reflect the hard reality that we are facing today. And the decision to prioritize public safety really comes from rising crime, increased violence, and the need to preserve emergency services that save lives. And even with reducing those FTEs, like I said, without reducing service levels, we won't see any cost savings. So this isn't a choice between library and police. It's not. And for that matter, one service over another. It is truly a response to a financial crisis that demands hard, often imperfect trade-offs. And they are. And in a crisis, the first thing is we must preserve services for life safety. And that shift in focus does not by any means mean that other services are not important. All public services, whether it is police, fire, parks, libraries, they're all interconnected. And we all know that. They are interconnected. And one cannot thrive without the others. So, but unfortunately, today, we are not in a moment of growth. We are in a time of crisis. And many of our services, as you can see that, many of our services have already shifted from proactive, community-based approaches to reactive, complaint-driven models. And that's not where we want to be as an organization or as a community. But it reflects the financial reality we have been facing over the past 10 years or so. The other question, why are costs going up while services are going down? And operational costs are driven by market forces beyond our control. Wages, healthcare, retirement, and inflation, everything is going up. And especially in essential public-facing roles, we cannot compromise safety of our employees. So it does take a lot more to provide the same services. So when the other piece that I do want to talk about, I know there was some conversation about contracts. When contracts are negotiated, the costs are driven by several factors. And it really comes down to how does the broader labor market look like, the demand for those particular services, because I think I mentioned that in the last budget committee meeting. Every year it changes. And it all depends on the timing of these negotiations and the demand for those particular services. So the other piece that I don't want to forget is the employees that are still with us and who are willing to go through this journey with us. I think it's important to acknowledge the dedication and commitment that our employees give to this organization and to this community. And I don't want us to forget that. So in times like this, we cannot afford to lose our experienced employees. And I did give some data on there is a cost when we lose employees and we have to rehire. So while it may feel like we are paying more for less, what we are actually doing is paying more to maintain what we already have, because the cost of doing business has gone up. And this is not just a Salem issue. This is true for every city and organizations in the country. This is the labor costs have gone up. Now, what happens next? The work continues, and we will continue to look for new revenue opportunities. We will look for efficiencies, and we will be very intentional in finding cost savings. And I have said this before, no one solution can help us with this deficit. It has to be a combination of all three. And we are watching closely at the state legislative, as the state legislative wraps up its session, and we're looking for any financial support it might provide to strengthen our services. Now, but more immediately, voters will decide the levy on May 20th, but the outcome may not be known for a few days. We don't know that. The council begins its budget work in early June, so we are working on a very tight timeline right now. And so I think that's why a clarity on the recommended budget now is essential. And it's essential that our residents understand the choices ahead of us and the constraints and the challenges we are navigating through right now. So I am asking for your support to provide that clarity to our community and staff during these uncertain times. I know this isn't a fair budget, but it is an impartial one. It reflects the reality of an incredibly difficult situation. I also want to acknowledge the weight of this process, that how much each of us are carrying this, for the employees whose jobs are on the line, for the community, the risk of losing key services that they rely on. But most importantly, each of you, you have been asked to guide this process without the benefit of easy options. This may feel like an impossible situation to be in, but in a way it is. but your leadership is critical as we move forward with the process. I am deeply grateful for your leadership, and I want to thank each of you for moving this process forward with responsibility, care, and openness. And I truly appreciate your dedication to Salem's future. So thank you.
Thank you, Interim City Manager Numbury. The next item on the agenda is special orders of business. And before we jump into special orders of business, where we will start looking at motions, I wanted to open the floor if there are any general questions of staff at this time. I believe that Member Curtis might have one.
Thank you, I do. You want me to ask the complicated one? So I'm hoping I can explain this correctly, and if not, I'm hoping that Member Allen and Member Cohen can help. So I have a question about the levy, and if the levy passes, I read in the material that it would raise about 15 million, 15.3 million, something like that. Our general fund shortfall is 13.8 million, just as a reference. And when I looked at this fiscal year's, 2025 fiscal year budget for the three entities that would be funded by the levy, that equals just a little over 18 million. So I guess my question is, if the levy passes, which I certainly hope it does, we would still be needing to find 3 or 4 million, or identify 3 or 4 million outside of the levy funds in our general fund to have a status quo budget for those three entities. Does that make sense?
Did you get enough there, Mr. CFO?
I did. I understand the
I'm
question.
probably wrong on something, but.
So it's a really good question, and we really haven't had a chance to talk about that scenario very much. So one thing that's missing from just those numbers are the other revenues that offset some of the costs for the library, parks, and Center 50 Plus. So the intent would be, and we're actually going to walk through this in each results area because we're going to talk about what the proposal would look like on the 28th if the levy passes. We come back, what gets added back. So we would actually create a new fund, a local option levy fund, and those services in their entirety for expenditures, positions, and revenues would all live in that local option levy fund. So there's, 3+ million for parks between right-of-way maintenance from transportation. We also have the transient occupancy tax for the tourist areas, some of the larger parks. For the library, we have the CCRLS. So all of those revenues would get recorded in that local option levy fund. So those services in their entirety, and it's very tight. I will say that there's not a lot of wiggle room there, but it does fit in the local option levy fund. And actually, the revenue expected for the first year is only 14 million.
Oh. Thanks. I mean, that helps. That's what I wanted to talk about. And this would, I'm trying to figure out when we would have these discussions, but so again, assuming that the levy passes, I say it frees up. I know there's probably a better budgetary term for that, but the bulk of the funding, let's just say, will come from the levy and a little bit more from other funds, whether it's general fund or another source. So that frees up additional general funds that would have gone to support the library, parks, and Center 50 Plus if the levy didn't pass. Does that make sense? And I'm wondering what the thinking, and maybe it's just we need to start thinking about it, but would those funds that were freed up by the levy funding, automatically go to police and fire, or would there be an opportunity for the budget committee to say, well, we actually want to enhance, we want to go above and beyond current service level? So I just kind of wanted to maybe start that conversation and see. if you're following.
Appreciate the question. I want to be careful because we don't want to assume the levy will pass. So we don't want to kind of plan on that happening without knowing. So we still have an expected deficit. So even with the local option levy, it pulls those services out of the general fund. Some of the one-time things that have helped a lot for this current year are still in place. The cost-saving strategies for 25 going into 26. Some of the one-time revenues. So the $2 million for State Street coming in this last year, or the current year, sorry, operating too many years. And then the $1.6 million from ARPA funding from the Cultural Tourism Fund. Those give some flexibility for fiscal year 2026, but I want to be really clear and really careful that there's still deficits coming for 27, 28, and 29. And what I wouldn't want to do is obligate any one-time revenues, any one-time funds for ongoing services, because that creates an ongoing continual structural imbalance, a similar situation to where we're in now. We don't know. We estimate for that levy, the revenue that will come in. We're expecting 14 million. It's a fairly conservative number with compression and discounts and things like that. But until the county certifies it, we don't know exactly what's going to be coming in. So I would really caution to be fairly conservative at this moment for any type of discussion about adding ongoing services. I believe there's still work to be done by the Budget Committee and City Council if the levy passes, and if the levy doesn't pass, on what the future financial roadmap looks like for the general fund.
Thank you. Just one quick follow-up. I appreciate that. Wasn't implying that we should make any decisions tonight at all until the levy passes or doesn't pass. But I just think it's important to get that thinking out there, how much money's coming in, what we're currently spending, what that may free up or not, and I know it's much more complex than me scratching in my little notebook, but I appreciate that, Josh. Thanks.
Josh, follow up to that. I believe what you said is that should the levy pass, that those three areas, departments, would wholly go into a new fund, the levy fund. So the entirety of those three areas would be transferred into the levy fund. Did I hear that correctly?
That is correct. I will note one exception. The SOS team is going to remain in the general fund. It's currently reporting under Parks. But yes, the Parks operations, Center for D Plus, and the library would all go into the local option levy fund with all the positions, revenues, and expenses. It's really challenging to split an individual service between two different funding sources. So the simpler accounting move is to have it all dedicated in that local option levy fund.
As we've gone through the process, if I'm not mistaken, there have been a few positions in other areas that have been identified as being restored if the levy passed. Can you help us understand how that plays into all of that?
Yeah, and I have this all keyed up to talk about in each of the individual results areas. I'm happy to give a preview. So what you'll see is actually, if the levy passes, we come back on the 28th. You'll see modifications to most funds, because one thing we did with the cost saving strategies is we were very consistent across people groups for individual funds. So some of the training, some of the equipment replacement, those were reduced pretty equally across the areas. So you'll see a return of some of those expenses by fund. You'll see some return of a few positions in the general fund that were reduced first, kind of before the community service area. And then also those adjustments to the other funds. So there are some impacts elsewhere, not just the local option levy fund. And then that creation pulls quite a bit of expenses out of the general fund and revenue. So you'll see a pretty large adjustment there also.
I appreciate the preview. Member Dixon.
May I ask a follow-up question on that? The city's explanatory material for the levy is fairly explicit. It says the levy money would set up a dedicated fund for the three services. And then I'm quoting here, it would preserve the general fund to pay for police, fire, and emergency services. are the scenarios that you're talking about consistent with that, what seems to be fairly straightforward language?
Yeah, I appreciate the question. Yes, still the vast majority of the general fund is dedicated to police and fire, and those services are not being reduced. There's actually, if the scenario goes through, there's some training and supplies and a few other things added back to those services.
Thank you.
Oh, Member Manville.
Yeah, just to make sure I'm clear, the city is not expecting to have a budget committee meeting should the levy fail.
That is correct. So if it's very clear the levy is not going to pass, the election will not be certified by the time we have to make this decision. It gets really complicated with Oregon budget law to have a levy and a new fund that aren't reviewed and recommended by the budget committee. So if it's close, we'll likely hold the meeting and we'll see. But if it's very clear it's not going to pass, no, our intention is not to reconvene the budget committee.
All right, I had a quick question for the city manager. If I'm not mistaken, in your comments, you said that reductions to public safety wouldn't save any money. And I certainly don't want to misquote you, and I'm certainly not recommending necessarily any cuts to public safety. But if I closed, as an example, if I close fire station number 8 and I don't add any FTE throughout the system, there's a degradation of service, but is there not a cost savings?
There will be. I think my statement was without reducing the service levels, there is no cost savings by eliminating positions.
Thank you for the clarification.
Thanks.
All right, are there any other general questions at this time? There'll be plenty of opportunity as we get to the results areas, and certainly after motions have been made. This was just an opportunity for general questions before we moved in. I'm not seeing any. So we're in section 7 of your agenda. The first area is urban renewal. So the first is the approval of the fiscal year 2026 urban renewal area ad valorem property taxes as outlined in the agenda and the urban renewal area budget document. So does the committee have any questions on this item? Josh, this doesn't show that you have any prepared statements in this area. Are you just waiting for questions?
Just here to help things along if needed.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions on this area? Member Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Josh, there's a recent audit of the urban renewal program that indicates the process for reimbursing the city for costs associated with providing support to the urban renewal program does not adequately cover all city costs dedicated to the URA. What is the city doing about revising the cost reimbursement methodology, which is something the audit recommends?
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. So I convened a meeting with community planning and development staff to evaluate their staffing model, how they allocate costs. We're looking at a few different options and actually hoping to bring those back to the city council. We're not ready quite yet. It's under development, but we're hoping to adjust that methodology for the budget, but in June with the city council.
Okay. And then, if I may, I have one more question. The performance audit indicates that the city doesn't have a strategic framework in place to guide the upcoming urban renewal decisions, and it recommends developing a strategic plan. Is that work anticipated or underway?
I appreciate the question. I'm going to defer to Kristen Rutherford.
Good evening, Kristen Rutherford, Director of Community Planning and Development. That work is not currently underway, but that work is planned to begin in the fall. We have some other key initiatives that are currently underway, and as we clear the decks, then we'll be moving to that initiative.
All right. Do I have a motion to approve the Salem Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 2026 ad valorem property taxes?
I move to approve the fiscal year 2026 Urban Renewal Agency ad valorem property taxes.
Second.
We have a motion from member or Vice Chair Cohen, seconded by member Tigan. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. We will now hear briefly from Josh regarding the Urban Renewal Agency budget.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It will be extremely brief. So the total URA budget for recommendation is $63.8 million, detailed out on the 4 funds there. Thank you.
Before we go to the motion for the Urban Renewal Agency, are there any questions for Josh? Seeing none, may I have a motion to recommend the Salem Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 2026 budget to City Council?
I move to recommend to the City Council the Salem Urban Renewal Agency's fiscal year 2026 budget.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. Is there any discussion of the motion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? I'm sorry for not pausing for those on that are with us virtual. I'll try and wait a little longer so we can hear your ayes. Are there any opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes. The next item is approving the City of Salem's ad valorem property taxes. Josh, everybody here probably understands that, but you want to give a quick explanation as to what they're approving?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So one of the main responsibilities of the Budget Committee is to approve the ad valorem property tax levies. We actually can't levy the property taxes without this step of the process. Displayed here are the 2 proposed property tax levies for the city. The first is the permanent rate, $5.83.15 for general fund operations, and then the general obligation bond debt levy of just over $20 million. And just to be clear, this is one of the pieces we would come back. If a local option levy were to pass, we would ask the Budget Committee to adopt that levy as well. Thank you.
And Josh, can somebody ask to have the permanent rate at $6?
You could ask, but no, you couldn't actually adopt that. You could adopt a lower rate, which I wouldn't recommend, but you can't go higher than the rate listed here.
Thank you for the explanation. May I have a motion for approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 ad valorem property tax? Oh, I'm sorry. There is a question from Member Tigan.
Sorry, this is just one of those times I want to make a point clear. So do you have a sense of, for similar sized cities in Oregon, what their adopted permanent tax rate is, like say the city of Eugene?
Yeah, so the city of Eugene's permanent rate is just over $7, and it's somewhat arbitrary. So back in 1997, when Measure 50 passed, I believe they used the prior year property tax levy, decreased it by 10%, and that was your permanent rate that's been the same ever since. So it's very arbitrary. Eugene's ended up higher. They have a higher tax base also, so they actually generate on an annual basis over $40 million more just from property taxes. Other cities, it's really all over the place. It really just depends where you were at back in 1997. So some are higher, some are lower.
Okay, thanks.
I am not seeing any other questions, so may I have a motion for approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 ad valorem property taxes?
I move for approval of the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 ad valorem property taxes.
Second.
All right, I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Curtis. Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? The motion passes. The final item this evening on this area is the final item this evening is the recommendation of the city budget to City Council. This action occurs by result area, as that is how the budget is presented. At this time, any motion to modify the budget for a result area can occur. If you have a question about which result area applies to a certain program or service, then please request clarification. Josh will outline what the area includes as well as the total proposed budget for that area. The budget includes the changes from the errata approved at a previous meeting by the Budget Committee. The first result area is good governance. Mr. Eggleston, please walk us through this result area.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to spend a little bit more time here because we're going to be going through a few of these. So the total for this result area is $137.6 million with 223.04 full-time equivalent positions. It includes the departments and services listed on this slide, including the City Manager's Office, Enterprise Services, the Equipment Replacement Reserve, Finance, Legal, Mayor and Council, the Pension Obligation Bond Debt Service, and the Shared Governance Services. As I previewed, as we walk through each of the areas, I'm going to talk very briefly about positions added back to the general fund or the levy fund if the levy were to pass. So for good governance, there's one city manager's office position. It's actually coming from the community services, but being reallocated to the city manager's office for alignment. One accountant, two in finance, and one half-time management analyst in the legal department. And also associated materials and services like controlled equipment, training, and supplies. And happy to answer any questions on this area. Thank you.
Are there any questions for the CFO on the area of good governance? Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if this is the appropriate time to make this motion, but I would move to have the staff develop the proportional cuts scenario into potential budget for review and consideration, and to return next week, for when we return next week.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion to have staff prepare a proportional cuts budget and bring it back for consideration next week. Moved by Member Manville and seconded by Member Curtis. Member Manville, you have priority on speaking to your motion.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to the staff for helping me. I was just, yeah, they said this isn't a fully developed proportional cuts budget, so we need to do more work on it before we would consider it. So I appreciate CFO Eggleston's clarifying that for me. And I want us to understand what the proportional cuts budget would do because, in part, they're the likely cuts for next year. So we need to start getting our minds around these cuts, regardless of whether the levy passes or not. The proportional cuts are 5.8 million, and we got 8.9 million shortfall next year. So we should start adding this to the community conversation. So that's my first point. Secondly, 60 of the 68 people, roughly, who testified to this committee talked about the library. The city manager's proposed budget guts the library that's already limping along. We need to take that seriously. We need to listen to the people who've spoken, and we need to flesh out the actual choice in front of us instead of just going along with the one recommendation. What I see the city manager's got an impossible task. What I see her proposed approach is, for lack of a better, is to cut off a leg and hope that the voters sew it back with the levy. And that feels not like a great way to go about this decision. I imagine that if we pass this budget tonight, the recommended budget, without considering other options, we're going to make the news. We're going to make the news as the city that gutted its library, and potential people and thinking about moving to Salem are going to know that about Salem. So that's a long-term thing. Now, I'm a long-term planner. I'm sorry, this is going to be a little bit long, but it's my only long. I'm a long-term planner. I think about the budget as a long-term problem, and I think we all kind of do. But when I put that frame on it, I think about our priorities like public safety, and I say, we're not going to be able to police ourselves to public safety given the revenues we have. We need to take a longer-term approach. We need to build a healthy community with great activities, libraries and parks and community centers, so the youth and the young adults who are disproportionately those who commit crimes have the resources to thrive, and that's the way we reduce crime in the long term. Now, the proportional cuts budget would still be a slight budgetary increase for police and fire because the overall budget increases. It would be a service decrease, as the city manager notes, but it'd still be more money spent on police and fire. Another benefit of considering the proportional cuts budget is honoring those who've chosen public service. Now, the city staff who've come, some of whom would lose their jobs, have had some emotional times. City Manager Numburi explained the costs of replacing staff that you lose. They're big. They're not just, oh, you lose somebody. It's actually an additional cost that you lose. So if we're firing people instead of letting natural attrition or not filling spaces, that's a larger cost to the city. But it's also just personal. I remember once going into my boss's office and saying, you know what? I just put an offer on a house. My wife and I are pregnant. And she said, you're fired. And I'm not sure that any of the people being let go have that sort of situation, but they have their own situation that letting them go would have a real impact on their lives and their family lives and their kids and their partners. So I want to think about that approach of if we can retain staff and just not hire back for a little bit, we should consider that, just out of humanity. Now, overall, we have 1/7 of the hours of the Eugene Public Library. We have 1/4 of what our own public library had in 2003. Our library is already limping, with the cuts, I should say. With the cuts to 20 hours, we would have 1/4 of the library hours. We'd have 20 hours a week. We've had kids come and testify to us. They're not going to make it on 20 hours. Now, police and fire are critical services, and that's why we prioritize them. They're number one by an order of magnitude over other things. That's fine. They've had record budgets year after year after year after year after year after year after year, and this proposed budget is another record budget. I'm grateful for their work. I want to give them more money. But this is, unfortunately, a choice between library and police and fire. The police chief talked about violent crime, and that's a concern to us all. I think it's, I want to acknowledge that, and I want to acknowledge it's disproportionately not people who live in my neighborhood. But Salem has a below average violent crime rate in America. In the first quarter, our violent crime fell 24%. Yes, these trends go up and down, but I'm not sure a couple of police officers on the edge are going to make a big dent in our rate of violent crime. And when we're comparing ourselves to other cities, we look at our library, which is 1/3 or 1/4 of our peer cities in terms of budget and staffing and hours and everything else. Our police force is 4% lower than Ben's in terms of officers per 1,000 people. So it's a little lower. We wish we'd had more money. We wish we had more police. It's 30% lower than some of our peer cities at the worst. But it's not 70, 80% lower than some of our peer cities. So it's not an easy choice we face. I didn't read what the city manager, the data that the city manager presented the same way she did, and it's hard data to read. I admire that. When we had our priorities stated as a budget committee, it was a real mix of things. It was not everyone saying, please, like, on the margin, public safety is what we need to fund at the expense of everything else. When Moss Adams did its survey, library, I think, was third, but it's not third in the budget. And in fact, our Moss Adams consultant came and said, you know, it's actually surprising, like, that's actually undervalued compared to where you budget. So that's what she said. It was a weird survey, I agree, but I think we have some mix there. And the polling from the city of Salem, I'm almost done. Thank you for your patience. When people were asked, do you want more money, you want to spend more money on police and fire, 34% said yes. Sorry, do you want to be taxed to pay more money? 58% said no. When asked for the same community services, 33-59. Those are roughly similar. The public wants it all. They don't desperately want all the cuts to come out of one place. And I think that that's what this budget does. And that's why we should more fully discuss, have more robust options in front of us next week. I'm not saying we have to take those options. I'm not saying we can't come up with a third option. I'm saying we should understand that. Because what we're doing is we're sending a big signal to my kids and future generation if we were to pass this budget as it's drafted. Yeah, we're not thinking about the future. Yeah, we're not thinking about your books. Yeah, we're not thinking about your parks. Or we're thinking about it, but we actually don't care about it because we have to give all of that money to our top two priorities, and we can't care about anything else. And that's not a message that I'm interested in sending. So I would love us to flesh out this option and to better understand it and to have another discussion. And you know, of course, cross our fingers that the levy passes and all this is for nothing. But or not all this is for nothing. I think regardless of whether the levy passes or not, it's helpful to have this data out there, to have a more fleshed out idea of what these cuts would look like, because they're likely future cuts coming at us. So thank you for letting me go on my stem winder. And anything else I will say will be much shorter the rest of the evening.
Mr. CFO, with regards to the motion, what are the practical implications with creating a budget document sufficient that it could be passed as an alternative budget by next week?
Yeah, really appreciate the question. So I think the alternate budget scenario you received last week, I think accurately depicted the impacts, the service impacts. What it didn't do is not a structured budget amendment. So I think, you know, if this were to move forward, what we would do is we would basically line out the position changes, the line item changes by fund and department, so that it's kind of convoluted, but you actually have to recommend a budget, right? So a dollar amount by individual fund. And that's not the way that scenario was structured. It really was just a what if. So the impacts, I think, were really well detailed out. You know, for the reduction in response times and then the units for the police department. But what we would need to bring back is, hey, here are the precise positions, the cost impacts, and the actual line item adjustments.
So from if the meeting is Wednesday, when would the budget committee be able to receive something to preview before the meeting?
Realistically, I think the earliest would probably be, you know, Tuesday, you know, probably Wednesday. I mean, it's not something we can turn around super quickly.
All right. Are there other comments, questions, or thoughts on this? Member Nishioka.
Thank you. I just want to make sure I would be understanding that all of the result areas in D would be ones that would be considered. So it isn't sectioned out by any specific result areas. You're talking about all of those result areas.
That was the intent of the motion. I didn't know where to squish it in the agenda, but I apologize if.
Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. To the motion, a few comments. I'd say, first of all, we've already done this. A framework was provided to this entire committee that outlined this already. So we're doing duplicative work to an already overworked staff. And so for that reason alone, I urge everyone to vote against this motion. Second, in our 5-year forecasts, we already see this information and already know what's going to happen. We're going to be closing down fire stations and laying off police officers. So that's already known. Thirdly, when we all took, minus member Fuller, because you were not part of the team back then, when we all took the Moss Adams survey, here were the results. How would you rank the city's leadership team principles? 1, follow the law. 2, be good stewards of taxpayer dollars. 3, take care of employees. And it goes down a little bit lower than that. Which result area should be prioritized in the upcoming budget? 70% of us said a safe and healthy community, which involves police and fire. Followed by that, 57 said safe and efficient infrastructure. Good governance, 57. Welcoming and livable community, 52. What that tells me is we already knew what our priorities were when we came into this. We've already wrestled with this. And I think that the city manager and the chief financial office has followed through what we have already agreed upon are the principles through which we should prioritize this budget. I really liked what the city manager said. This budget is holistically unfair, but it is impartial. I think that is the message we need to take home. Impartial means that we're unbiased and we're just. It means that we'll do the least amount of harm to our community by doing these cuts. Just today, as I was going to lunch with my wife and my children, a senior person collapsed in the parking lot in front of Chick-fil-A. Who got there first? City of Salem Fire. 3 minutes later, our ambulance providers that are not City of Salem. We need our safety and police members fully present and able to respond to any kind of circumstance that happens. Violence has been exploding in this community. I have lived here since 1999. This is the worst I've ever seen this community as far as violence goes. Does that mean it's the mean streets of Chicago where I went to school in undergrad? Of course not. But to say that we should compare ourselves to Chicago or some other major metropolis is, I think, unwise. Getting to a comment that was made, honoring those who chose public service. When you take that oath, you put on that badge, you wear the uniform that a police officer, firefighter does. I'm saying this as experience from when I was in the military. That is a wholly different feeling than what I do every morning as a senior budget analyst for the Oregon Health Authority. Why? Because I know that my life is not on the line when I log on and check how my Excel spreadsheets are doing. When those men and women go and they provide services to someone who falls over and may die from a heart attack, or from a fire that happens, or if you read the newspaper, 16-year-old who shoots up West Salem, major traffic ring here in Salem, bombs that went off that Mr. Police Chief talked about last week. These are real things. And I think that it is outright disgusting that we would consider in this budget a proposal to reduce that. So I am going to be adamantly against this motion because it is not a good use of our time. As I said, we've already seen this stuff. And if we need to get to this next year, we will wrestle with it then. But let's focus on what we're actually here to do today, which is to pass the budget that is unfair but impartial and gets the city the clarity that it needs. Thank you, Chair.
Are there other comments? Member Curtis.
Thank you. So I've been really, really wrestling, as I guess Member Manville has as well, and maybe a lot of us, with, and I said it last week, the fact that 60% of our general fund budget is not being touched in these cuts. And we all want public safety. We all want all these things that police and fire provide. But when I came into this year, I just sort of said to myself, I don't think I can support a budget that doesn't touch 60% of the funds that we have a problem with, and that everything else takes the cuts. And, I go back and forth on that thinking, but I don't feel, Member Cohen, that we've been presented with, here's what 10% cut would look like in the police department. And I'm not talking just about staff or, officers. Do we need a new car every year or whatever? I don't know the budget well enough. And so I don't feel comfortable or competent, honestly, in recommending that we cut X amount from the police budget, because we've never been presented, I don't think, anything that we can chew on and say, like last week I said, what does the canine patrol do? I didn't know, and they're just regular officers that have dogs, and I tried to bore in on some things that I thought maybe could be cut. I don't know. But to hold those two entities harmless just doesn't feel right to me. The fire department, yes, they're taking on the EMS services, and we may need to give them a year to figure that out. But I agree with you, and I hate it. We all want everything funded. Of course we need a robust police and fire departments, but I don't know, maybe I'm just somebody that wants to see the fairness spread across. And the other thing I want to talk about is the polling. So when you are asked, what's your highest priority for funding in your community? Well, it's going to be police and fire. I mean, I don't think anybody, or very few people, would say, I want to fund parks before we have any police officers. So those are always going to rank high, and they should. But it doesn't mean that you want to fund those at the expense of other things that may come lower in your priority in a poll, but you really still want library and you want parks. It's just that you're not going to not fund police to get those things. So I really am skeptical of those polls, and I think they skew the wholeness of how people feel about our community. So I support the motion.
Member Dixon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I admire Member Manville's expertise and his courage for bringing this forward. It is an issue that does need to be addressed. I don't support the motion, and the reason has to do with my reading of the city's explanatory material for the ballot measure, which to me makes it very clear the levy money would set up a dedicated fund for 3 services, and if the levy did not pass, then those services would be cut. The explanatory language also makes it clear that the levy is, the funds that it would free up for the 3 services would preserve the general fund to pay for police, fire, and emergency services. The levy does not make it clear to the voters that there might be an attempt to unwind those commitments before the vote is even taken. And I believe the city has made a commitment to the voters that there is a certain situation and that certain things will happen. And I believe this motion would unwind some of that commitment that the city has made. And so that's why I would oppose this.
Thank you, Member Dixon. Member Tigan.
Thank you. I think a great point, Member Dixon. I too will be opposing the motion. I appreciate your comments and concern about where we're at as a city. And there's a couple things about what you said that I really do share. in terms of opinion. And I think a couple of those is that I really see our struggles as a city's budget as more than just this year. And we know how difficult it is to get our residents to understand our budget. And the bargain that we've struck with the community in terms of talking about parks, talking about the library, talking about Center 50 Plus is a multi-year conversation just to get to the point of a 8-0 vote on council to support those institutions for 5 years. To unwind that conversation tonight or in the next 2 weeks, I think would be a lot to expect the public to come along with it. I also agree that we could face a situation where the scenario that we were presented with last year becomes essentially the scenario we tackle. The scenario that we were presented with last week becomes the scenario that we tackle next year as a group. That scenario where we turn our fire department into essentially a rural fire department in terms of response time, and where we decrease police services, I feel like needs the exact same kind of multi-year conversation that we've needed to have about the library. Those aren't the kinds of changes you can spring on. I don't feel like I can spring those on the 25,000 people I represent in 2 weeks. Like that, to me, just feels unfair to them. I feel very passionate that we need to move as a city from fasting to feasting. We need to grow, but and that's what we've really asked our community for support on the levy. I've already voted. My ballot's in the mail, it's gone. And I voted on the construct of what we said would be covered in the levy and what we said as much as we could know about the budget leading up until 2 days ago when I voted. So I'd have a really hard time changing that, to Member Dixon's point, but also I think we need to get to a place as a community, if we're going to radically restructure our emergency services, we need to give our community time to address that. And I guarantee if we had been sane for the last year, that we were going to reduce our fire and police services, that we would have seen many, many more people come into our chamber and comment about that. And those are the conversations that we welcome through this process. And we may be seeing those next year, depending on the result of the levy. So again, I'll be voting no, but again, as always, I appreciate your voice and that you bring it here.
Member Fuller.
Yeah, bear with me here with my scratchy voice. I'll keep it short. It was brought up earlier that I wasn't part of some earlier conversations in polling, and that's absolutely correct. I wasn't, but it wasn't because I didn't ask to be. When I learned that there would be an opening on this budget committee when Irving Brown was elected to council, I immediately turned in my application. I could have been a part of those, but through whatever process there is, I wasn't asked to join until right before these meetings started about 4 or 5 weeks ago. So I just like to point that out, that here I am, a very new member who could, anyway, I just like to point that out. Thank you.
Member Vieira Brandel.
Thank you. I want to thank Member Manville for bringing this forward and say that I do support this. And I have a lot of other thoughts. I'll try to also keep my comments brief, though. I just want to highlight the kind of long-term perspective that he was taking with his comments around why he brought this forward. I understand that we find ourselves in a crisis across many different factors of life right now. I also think that, and people have recognized tonight, that the things that we are cutting are things that are going to prevent us from getting further and further into crisis. And I am very concerned about us moving forward and facing a situation next year where we've cut some of the few services that do provide preventative factors, preventative elements, protective elements to our city, and we're going to need more money for police and fire. 60% of the budget's it's going to become 70%. It's going to become 80% because we're finding ourselves living in a city where people have no other outlets, have no other resources, have no other supports. And I think that this is worth considering. I think this is also worth considering because of all the public testimony we have heard. I do agree, Member Teigen, that if people had been hearing about cuts to police and fire for longer, there probably would be more people coming to us. That being said, I also think, unfortunately, we have had members of this committee that have contributed to misinformation in our community about what is at risk and what is the cause of our budget deficits. And so people have not understood what they should have until recently. And I also guess I'd like to take a moment to remind everyone that we are a committee of individuals. I know that we represent different parts of town, we represent different communities, but we are also people with different beliefs, different values, different opinions. And so I would like to thank Member Manville for bringing this forward and voicing his opinion honestly and voicing his beliefs and his values tonight. And I don't think that that's something that we should be dismissive of or we should be angry about. I think we should be thankful for the opportunity to have this conversation. And if we want to start talking about, again, what is disgusting or what is nauseating or what is infuriating to us, I think we should be talking about the times that people have contributed to misinformation so that our community doesn't understand the situation we find ourselves in now. I think we should talk about the times that we have changed the benchmark on our community where we've told them to come and speak to us. That's enough. If you come and talk to us, we'll take that into consideration. And now it's, oh no, we need you to vote. We need you to get out and vote on something. That's what's going to take us to make us take you seriously. And it's, oh, no, actually, we need your help now. We need you to get other people to start voting too. That's what's going to get us to consider your opinions more seriously. I think there's a lot of other things that we could talk about that have been frustrating and infuriating about this process. And I would like us to not put that on the opinions and the beliefs of everyone on this committee.
Thank you. Are there further questions, comments on the motion? Oh, Member Nishioka.
Thank you, Chair. Member Manville, thank you again for, as many others have said, for bringing this forward. And I respect the fact that as a long-term planner, you're seeing it as long-term. I feel that, unfortunately, to get information out to our community, it becomes very difficult to get them to understand long-term. And so I think that in some ways we need to do it piece by piece, in a sense. And I agree very much with Member Teigen in the sense that we as counselors and the PAC committee that's come forward and those that are campaigning, I think if we interrupt that has a huge impact on what's already been going on. So again, while I really appreciate it and I don't disagree with the effort, but I do feel that it may become more confusing. And I think that we will need to tackle public safety in the next fiscal year budget cycle, and hopefully we can get ahead of it a bit by potential sources of revenue that we may learn about or may have to consider. So, though, again, I thank you for bringing it forward, I will not be voting in favor of this.
Member Manville, was that kind of a note? Right?
No, I wasn't sure if you were trying to speak, Chair, or yeah. Just a couple of notes. I appreciate the thoughtful responses of the fellow committee members. I think back to when we were first asked to recommend putting the levy on the ballot. And I said, I am not willing to go forward with something that puts all their eggs in the basket and lets the voters throw the library out. But if that's not what's going to happen, I'm okay putting it on the ballot. And I supported that motion I would like to say that I'd like the budget committee to come back after for the May 28th meeting, regardless. I'm not going to make a motion on that, but we're all struggling with how to explain what's going on to the voters, how to make a compelling case for the levy, how to not muddy the waters, and it was a struggle to see whether this, should I muddy the waters or not. But I couldn't look at myself tomorrow morning if I hadn't done this. So I appreciate your thoughts. And I stopped by the library on the way here. So yeah, I'm not going to be able to do that in the future if we had this direction.
Thank you, Member Manville, and now Member Matthews.
I do want to point out one thing that actually really resonated for me with your motion and really the intent of, and in all truth, for me, I wouldn't support the way the motion sits right now because of all the reasons that have been stated. But I do think it's really valuable to start looking at the future a little earlier. And so I think, even though for this budget cycle, I don't see me supporting this motion in delaying this actual process. I do think getting an earlier jump on the next budget cycle is really valuable to be able to see the cuts that will be coming once we know whether this levy is passing or, well, if it doesn't pass, right? And so I think that's a really good point that I would really hope the staff and everyone else is hearing, that we should start this process much sooner next year to be able to vet out what this looks like.
Thank you. I would simply add, first of all, thank you very much for your thoughts and on this subject. It's very important. While I would have preferred a little greater explanation as to the 10% increase in police without an increase in FTE, I would also say that with 30 years of public budgeting behind me, that there are times when, in times of crisis, that you have to cut off the leg to save the rest of the body, that you can't just keep cutting across the board. It feels good, but there are times when you just can't allow all the services to perform subpar. You have to start making tough decisions. And I think that's kind of what's being looked at in this budget. Are there any other comments or questions on the motion? Member Varney.
Thank you. This is just really brief. And thank you, Member Matthews. Were you reading my mind? For some reason, we do that all the time, it seems. I wanted to say, and also thank you so much for the motion. But I did want to really say we need to start to prepare for this scenario, regardless of whether the levy passes or not. If it passes, we'll have all the parks, library stuff in a separate fund, but we're still going to have to deal with the general fund and the increase, the $8.9 million. And so I agree with you. I just wanted to say we are going to have to do this, and I appreciate you bringing it up. And I think, didn't you bring up the motion in January or something earlier? Somebody did. Anyway, to start looking at it that way. And so I think we have been looking at that in the back of our minds, and just, as you said, it's been a real battle. But thank you.
Are we ready for the question? I believe so. I would ask for a roll call vote. I think there'll be quite enough nays that we need to make it clear.
Thank you so much. That's helpful. Okay. Member Belachek.
Aye.
Member Nishioka.
Nay.
Member Brown.
Nay.
Member Manville.
Aye.
Member Vieira Brandel.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Nay.
Member Matthews.
Nay.
Member Gwen.
Nay.
Member Julie Hoy.
Nay.
Member Varney.
Nay.
Member Dixon.
Nay.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Fuller.
Aye.
Member Guyer.
Nay.
Vice Chair Cohen.
Nay.
Chair Allen.
Nay.
Motion fails.
All right. Thank you. All right. We had just gotten, we had a discussion of the good governance area by the CFO. Yes.
I have one more question I'd like to ask that I think pertains to good governance.
If you think it pertains to good governance, then by all means, bring it forward.
Thank you for that validation. Josh, what is the schedule for updating the operations fee to better reflect city costs to serve large industrial and commercial and institutional clients, accounts?
Yeah, appreciate the question. So just for some context for the committee, the city operations fee is set by account classification with very little nuance between sizes of entities. One thing that city staff have committed to is having that policy discussion with city council. The utility billing software has gone live. I'm sure all of you are aware of that live in Salem. All of you do, actually. So we're live with the utility billing software. We've had some preliminary conversations with City Council about a potential data set and structure. We intend to continue that conversation going into this summer and this fall with City Council with the intention to come back with a scope of work. One thing that's different about the utility billing software is we'll actually have to have it programmed. So once we have the structure and the data set available, and that policy discussion by City Council, will be able to work with the software provider to implement that solution. So we're not there yet. There's still some steps ahead for City Council.
Just one follow-up. Do you hope to have that work completed in time for the budget planning for 2027?
I believe it would be available for the budget plan for 2027.
Thank you.
Member Belichick.
Thank you, Chair Allen. I have a question about the agenda, so please let me clear my mind so I can focus on the next presentation. Did we skip C2, 7C2? Were we supposed to approve the general obligation bond levy? Because we keep talking about hoping that it passes.
No, that I believe the recorder is nodding that was included in the motion, and that's not the levy. That's the general obligation bonds that had previously been passed by voters.
Gotcha. Thanks for the clarification.
All right. May I have a motion to approve the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 good governance result area budget?
I move to approve the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 good governance result area budget.
Second.
I have a motion from Member Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. So is there any further discussion in the area of good governance? Seeing none. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Motion passes. The next area is natural environment stewardship. CFO Eggleston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total for this result area is $28.4 million and 105.82 full-time equivalent employees. It includes climate action plan, environmental education, environmental monitoring, and environmental compliance. There are no general fund dollars in this result area, just to be clear. If the levy passes, there are some materials and services that will be recommended for inclusion back into this result area as part of that consistent cost-saving strategy that was implemented, adding some of those back. It's a fairly small amount. Happy to address any questions.
Are there any questions of staff for the natural environment stewardship result area? Let me turn my page. May I have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 natural environment stewardship result area budget?
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 Natural Environment Stewardship Result Area Budget.
I'll second that.
There's a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Nishioka. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, please signify by saying no. Motion passes. The third area tonight will be safe and healthy community. Josh?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total for this result area is $232.7 million, 623.96 full-time equivalent positions. It includes the services of building safety, emergency medical services, fire and emergency response, municipal court, police emergency response and law enforcement, radio communications, and the Willamette Valley Communications Center or the 911 call center. As with other areas, if the levy passes, there are some controlled equipment, training, supplies, and equipment replacements that would be proposed for restoration in this area. Happy to address any questions. Thank you.
Are there questions of Josh on the safe and healthy community results area? I am not seeing any. I may have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 safe and healthy community result area budget.
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 Safe and Healthy Community Result Area Budget.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Tigan. Is there any discussion on the motion? Member Manville.
Thank you. I want more police and fire. I think they do critical things. I think we're in the situation we are for lots of reasons. From the federal government that is a wreck and has made some really fiscally imprudent things and investments, to some state decisions about, various things, PERS and property tax measures voters passed, thinking they could get something for free, to a bunch of local decisions that have just harmed where we are budgetarily. We kind of went out and decided to spend millions of dollars subsidizing an airline before the market was ready for it. We said, oh, they wouldn't come unless we spent a bunch of millions of dollars. We had the voters pass a very expensive police station. It's great, but it's very expensive, and it reduced the voters' appetite for other expenses. It's a lot more expensive than some of our peer cities. We passed a safety and livability bond, which did a lot of great things, but also kind of followed a pattern of shiny ribbon-cutting capital above operations funding. And we're looking at maybe building some stuff that will have zero staff in it. I voted for it. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone, but saying these local decisions have added up. We've campaigned really saying we could get there through efficiencies instead of hard cuts and hard decisions. We haven't acted aggressively after funding a revenue task force that came up with a bunch of recommendations. We doodled around for months, put all of our things in one basket of the livability levy, instead of saying this is actually an emergency. And because when we are slow on some revenue increases, that's going to mean a gutted library and less police and fewer fire and less parks. And we have a culture that says when we decide to cut things, that doesn't have to go to voters. But when we decide to ask for a little bit more money, that should definitely go to voters. So somehow, all those aspects are adding into these challenges. I'm going to be a no vote on this, as I explained earlier, not because I don't want more, but because it means that it's taken out of our critical long-term investments in community livability and public safety.
Is there more question or discussion on the motion? I am seeing none. I will ask for a roll call vote on this one.
Member Guyer,
Aye.
Member Belacheks,
Aye.
Member Fuller,
Aye.
Member Nishioka,
Aye.
Member Curtis,
Nay.
Member Brown,
Aye.
Member Dixon,
Aye.
Member Manville,
Nay.
Member Varney,
Aye.
Member Vieira Brandel,
Nay.
Member Julie Hoy,
Aye.
Member Tigan,
Aye.
Member Gwen,
Aye.
Member Matthews,
Aye.
Vice Chair Cohen,
Aye.
Chair Allen,
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next area is safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure. I believe Mr. Eggleston is going to continue with the mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, on this slide, we have the total for this results area as well as construction funds that will be coming up right after this. But included in safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure is 157.4 million, 291.48 full-time equivalent positions. And the results area includes the debt service for the general obligation bonds, infrastructure project management, streetlight services, transportation services, and utility maintenance and operations. And I'm happy to address any questions on this area. Thank you.
Are there questions of staff? I would note that unlike the other areas, this one has been divided into two motions, one on the budget and then one on the capital improvements portion. So may I have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area?
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 safe, reliable, and efficient infrastructure result area.
Second? Whatever.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Motion passes. We will pause at this time for Member Dixon. Before we get into the capital improvements budget, I believe you have a motion that would be appertaining to this point on the agenda.
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to offer the following motion regarding the capital improvement plan. I move to recommend that the City Council amend Council Policy C9 to require review committees to analyze and report on the city's organizational capacity to fund future maintenance of projects proposed to be added to the CIP.
Second.
We have a motion from Member Dixon and a second by Member Manville. That was a much shorter motion.
Thank you. May I offer a few comments?
You have primary consideration on speaking to the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate the opportunity to present a revised motion about maintenance of capital projects. The city's immediate needs are humbling, as are the efforts of this committee and staff to deal with them collaboratively. I believe there also is a potential benefit to examining long-term needs, and my motion is one attempt to start that process. Before we move to discussion, I would like to note that the proposed budget for capital projects includes proposed budget for capital projects includes $155 million for things such as roadways, affordable housing, parks, and water and wastewater utilities. Most of these projects will improve or replace aging assets and reduce current maintenance costs. Some will add new capital assets and incur new maintenance costs. A majority were either authorized by voters or paid for by property developers. But every one of them incurs a long-term maintenance obligation. The City Council should be able to assess the cost of these long-term obligations as it determines which projects to include in future capital improvement plans and how to pay for them. I believe my motion could start a process for that to happen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Member Dixon, on your motion, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is providing additional information to council, but it does not tie their hands in any way.
Correct.
Thank you. Are there other questions or comments? Discussion? Member Tigan.
Thank you to the maker of the motion. Can you read it one more time?
Certainly. I apologize. It was the one thing I was quick about. I move to recommend that City Council amend Council Policy C9, which governs capital improvements, to require review committees to analyze and report on the city's organizational capacity to fund future maintenance of projects proposed to be added to the CIP.
Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. Member Dixon, I strongly support your motion, and I'm very thankful for you just taking time to speak with me over the weekend to support this. I know that there are several members of our committee who looked at the CIP and have asked questions about, for instance, the merit of the city purchasing land for parks if we don't have staff for it. So I think that this will help streamline that conversation and remove projects that are really not a benefit to this community at the time. So I will strongly support your motion.
Member Matthews.
Would it be appropriate to ask staff what this looks like in practice?
I am seeing a nod from the CFO. Take it away.
Yeah, appreciate the question. And just to make sure everyone's clear, so it's a recommendation of City Council to modify the policy. So it'll come before City Council for consideration. In practical terms, what it means is we have internal review committees. We also have the Finance Committee that serves as a review committee for the CIP. So both of those processes would add this element to it, where you analyze and report on the potential impacts of maintenance obligations, both for an internal process and then also at the Finance Committee for their review.
Member Varney.
Thank you. Can I add on to that? How much more staff time would this take, or would this be incorporated into our existing committees?
There will be no new committees formed with this work. It will be additional effort. I don't know, Director Martin, if you want to try to estimate an additional staff impact.
Good evening, Chair Allen and Budget Committee members. Brian Martin, Public Works Director. We actually worked with Member Dixon in drafting that statement. We think by adding scoring criteria to the process we already have, so we have different areas that we score projects on. The biggest part would be to evaluate how we come up with what those long-term maintenance costs are. So we may have to come up with what is the cost to maintain a park per acre, or what is the cost to maintain a street per mile, or something like that. Once we come up with that criteria, then we could easily apply that to our scoring matrix, and then the committee just reviews it and, scores it based on that criteria. So there'll be a little bit of upfront time needed to develop what that criteria is, but once we get it, I think it should be manageable.
Member Nishioka.
Thank you. So again, just to kind of add on to that, what I'm hearing, when I hear the motion, it sounds like a new committee is being asked for, but based on what Josh and you are telling me or telling us, that it would be some staff time initially, but that then it's not another committee that has to review these projects. It would simply be preparation, so the committee that's doing it would just have more information.
That's correct.
Okay.
Back to Member Varney.
Sorry, but I'm thinking about parks and purchasing land for parks. We purchase land based on basically our park system master plan, which, for instance, says that we have to have a neighborhood park within each half-mile radius, for example. And I know that master plan is being revised or will be revised in the next couple of years. So I'm wondering, how does that tie into us purchasing land for parks? Kind of what overrides what? I'm just curious because I don't know.
That's an excellent question. I think we're going to have to evaluate that. So we definitely want to maintain our densities in our parks to meet the criteria that we establish to make sure we have parks, a certain number of parks per, population density. Whether we develop them or not, that could be something that could be deferred. There's different phases of park development. Some is we get the property and we just have walking trails, which are low maintenance. It's when you start developing them and, putting infrastructure in, that's when they become more of a difficult thing to maintain or takes more resources. So I don't know the exact formula. I don't think our parks folks, and Gretchen is here, she could talk about it. I don't think they would recommend not getting that property when the development happens. I think they may say how we develop it in the future may be the appropriate way to go about doing it. So those are discussions we're going to have as we look at it.
Thank you.
Member Tigan?
Yeah, maybe to that point, I just want to acknowledge Member Dixon's work to improve the motion, which I'll be supporting. I think the way you've constructed it is really for the transparency of the decision-making and in an advisory capacity. And maybe to Member Varney's point, just in terms of, if it's another line in the CIP description, I love the CIP book and having, a line in there that says estimated cost or high, medium, low, however we decide to come about it at the council. I think that's the kind of transparency we're looking for, not something that would essentially control our decision-making about what does and doesn't go in. So appreciate the work. Thank you.
Member Matthews.
Yeah, I completely agree. I appreciate the time you put in on it. And I think this revised version of this motion is really thoughtful in that whole fact that it doesn't tie the hands of the staff or the hands of the council or the hands of the city, but it still allows us to weight those into our decision making and really vet it out so that everyone can see. So I think it's great.
Thank you again, Member Dixon, for the patience and time that you spent in recrafting your motion. Anything else before we call for the question? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion on the table, please signify by saying aye. Are there any opposed? And Member Belichick is opposed. Thank you. Moving back to the agenda, the next area is the capital improvements budget.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, yeah.
I have a question. I'm sorry. I thought Member Fuller also indicated opposition. I'm sorry.
Appreciate that. Member Fuller? How did you vote?
Sorry, I voted aye.
I apologize. It just looked like her hand went up when the noes were speaking.
You're right. When I put it up, I was like, oh, I hope they don't think so. I'm sorry. I'll try to be quicker next time.
Member Dixon just wanted to revel in his acceptance of his motion just a little longer. All right, the next area is the capital improvement budget. CFO Eggleston, did you have anything to add to your previous comments? All right. Are there any questions of staff related to the capital improvements area? May I have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 capital improvements budget?
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 capital improvements budget.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Dixon. Is there any discussion on the motion? Of the motion, I guess. All right. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Are there any opposed? Please signify by saying no.
No.
So we had one no with Member Manville. Motion passes. The sixth area tonight is strong and diverse economy. Back to you, Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For the strong and diverse economy, this is the city side. The total for the result area is 17.8 million, 31.16 full-time equivalent positions, including airport operations and administration, business retention and recruitment, city tours and promotion, downtown parking structure operations, leasehold operations, parking enforcement, and then the parking equipment replacement reserve.
You need to have some way of signifying when you're done. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, not quite done.
All right, go ahead.
There is one position that would be added back to the general fund in the levy scenario. This position was given up in order to mitigate the need to reduce community services, so we'd like to add it back. It's for the parking enforcement. And one side note is this is likely a revenue generating position. So as you have parking enforcement out, more people out there, especially with paid on-street parking, it can be extremely important to make sure we're enforcing those rules. I am done. Thank you.
Thank you for being clear. Are there questions of staff or any other discussion related to the strong and diverse economy result area? Member Dixon.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize. Josh, I really don't understand how we have a levy that's designed to fund 3 areas and protect 2 other, but then we're adding back positions in unrelated programs.
Yeah, I really appreciate the question. So in development of the fiscal year 2026 budget, in order to mitigate the reductions needed for community services, to retain the employees that we still have listed for library, parks, and Center 50 Plus, other departments like finance, community planning and development, we essentially gave up certain positions, not that they're not needed, but in order to mitigate the impacts for fiscal year 2026. So with the levy passing, those services being restored, we're proposing to add those positions back to the general fund.
So a follow-up question?
Member Dixon, they'd be paid back by the savings in the general fund by moving those operations solely into the levy fund. There would be general fund dollars that would be freed up that are not covered by the explanation that you've been reading, but you may go ahead, follow up with staff.
Thank you. I appreciate that explanation.
And if I said that,
there's no need for a follow-up.
and if I
your indulgence
misspoke,
is really appreciated.
staff has to correct me.
No, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely correct.
Are there other questions for staff in this results area? May I have a motion to recommend the city, well, actually, before we do that, I would say that I'll be supporting this motion. I do have some concerns about the airport. The airport is in this area with regards, I know the studies that show the economic impact on the in the overall community, so the leveraging of the dollars that are spent, but I also see the dollars that are spent that could potentially be spent elsewhere. So while I will be supporting it, I do share some concerns relative to airport operations. May I have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 strong and diverse economy result area budget?
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 strong and diverse economy result area budget.
Second.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Curtis. Is there any discussion on the motion? Member Tigan.
Yeah, Chair Allen, I just would like to acknowledge your statement and my own support of it about the airport and how much subsidy of its operation comes out of the general fund. I really feel like if this is part of the conversation for next year as well, just in terms of that long-term conversation that we were discussing earlier this evening, I really feel like if we're the sort of a community that can't come up with the resources to fund a library, in in my mind, that also means we're the kind of community that doesn't have the resources to support and subsidize the airport. And it's a hot topic in our inboxes right now for really obvious reasons. But I feel like the amount of subsidy that comes from the general fund for an airport that doesn't, I'm not sure when it breaks even and is able to support itself, is certainly going to continue to be a topic of conversation, I hope, on the Budget Committee in the coming year.
Member Manville.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Member Tigan. I'm going to be a no on this for that exact reason, that we shouldn't be paying for an airport when we can't afford a library. When the airport people came and did their song and dance, one of the things they noted is we have the cheapest flights of any regional airline. The other way of looking at it is people value these flights less than any other regional airport in the region. So I can't quite believe that we're funding that and not the library, and so I'll be a no.
I must have missed that evening. I don't remember a song or a dance, but okay. Are there, yes, Member Varney.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to express, I too have concerns about the airport and feel they need to be addressed next year. I realize, regardless of whether we have an airport or not, we need to have fire response there. With the transition of us taking the EMS system in-house, and we have personnel in the Hertz building to help with that. I mean, there are numerous things swirling around how we need to use our airport right now. And so I agree, we need to look at this very closely next year.
Member Nishioka.
Thank you. The airport is working on their master plan, and I feel privileged to be involved in that along with Mayor Hoy, and I think we're really trying to make it quite clear that the airport needs to fund itself, and that is the goal. And I know that it has been the goal. It just hasn't gotten there as quick as we had hoped. So I agree, we need to be evaluating this. The airport is important for our economy in many different ways. And so I hope that we can find that, how we can keep that the infrastructure working so that we can get the federal grants to keep the runways going. We need it for public safety. We need it for emergency evacuation. There's so many more things, so we just really need to figure out mechanisms to make sure it can fund itself. And I agree, we definitely have to have that as a major discussion again for the next fiscal year. Thank you.
Member Vieira-Brandl.
Thank you. I'll just highlight what I said last week too. We had a great and very robust conversation about what is essential in our city and what makes for a full service city, and our airport, and particularly commercial air service, never came up once. So I look forward to having conversations about that in the future. And unfortunately, I too, like Member Manville, won't be able to support this though tonight.
Is there further discussion on the motion? There's going to be at least 2 no votes, so I'd ask for a roll call.
Member Belicheks.
Aye.
Hang on, sorry. Okay, Member Manville.
No.
Member Matthews.
Aye.
Member Curtis.
Aye.
Member Fuller.
Nay.
Member Nishioka.
Aye.
Member Brown.
Aye.
Member Tigan.
Aye.
Member Vieira-Brandl.
Nay.
Member Gwen.
Aye.
Member Varney.
Aye.
Member Dixon.
Aye.
Member Julie Hoy.
Aye.
Member Guyer.
Aye.
Vice Chair Cohen.
Aye.
And then Chair Allen.
Aye.
Motion passes.
The seventh and final area is welcoming and livable community. Josh.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The total for this results area is 34.7 million with 94.64 FTE. It includes CDBG and home, federal programs, homeless and sheltering coordination, long-range and current planning, neighborhood enhancement, parks, recreation, Center 50 Plus, Salem Arts and Transient Occupancy Tax Grants, Salem Public Library, social services and affordable housing, and trust funds. And if you'll bear with me, I have a couple more slides just for this one. So added back in this scenario to the general fund is one planning position, similar to the other ones we've discussed that are outside of the community services department. And then on this slide, so in the levy fund, this tries to kind of holistically talk about the levy fund. So the positions in parks maintenance, recreation services, Center 50 Plus, community services administration, Salem Public Library. These positions are recommended to be added back if the levy passes to the local option levy fund. Also with that, we have the creation of the local option levy fund and the transfer of all other community services positions, 55.2 FTE, expenditures and revenues from the general fund to the levy fund, with the addition of 3 full-time equivalent positions to expand library hours for a total in the levy fund of 99.1 full-time equivalent positions. I'm happy to address any questions you all might have. Thank you.
Are there questions of staff? Member Curtis.
Thank you. So the levy would be basically a status quo positions as compared to this fiscal year, except for the addition of the 3 FTE to expand the library hours?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
I see no other questions of staff. May I have a motion to, oh, I'm sorry, Member Dixon.
I can't get my head around this. You create the local option levy fund, and the local option levy was to save 3 programs. And you outline the positions in those programs that you're going to save, and then you're transferring all other community services positions, expenditures and revenue from the general fund to the levy fund. Is that consistent with what's on the ballot and what's in the explanatory material?
Yes, absolutely. So the balance of the positions relate to those 3 programs. So
I'm sorry? Could you speak up just a little bit?
Yeah, sorry, I'll try to get closer. We need about 7 more inches, I think. So the other 55 positions are part of those 3 programs. So it's the balance of the library employees, the balance of the parks and recreation employees, and the senior center. So with the local option levy, it's supposed to fully fund those programs. So all of those programs are going to be in there. The reduction scenario did not eliminate all of them. So with the creation of a local option levy fund, we're adding positions back and then transferring everything else that's community services, with the exception of the SOS team, into the new fund.
And will there be some money from the general fund then that goes into the levy fund?
Potentially, yes. We have a potential cash flow issue just with how money moves, but we're not looking at subsidizing it to some high level. So what'll come back to you if the levy passes, as I think $350,000 needed just for appropriation authority. It gets a little technical. We can't adopt a fund budget that is in balance. So we need a slight balance that might or might not be used to offset those expenses.
But following up on his quick question, will there be any FTE, material supply services, paid for from general fund dollars in that special revenue fund?
With the exception of the potential small transfer, no. Everything would be self-contained in the local option levy fund.
That sounded like it was a cash flow purpose, not for supplies, materials.
I'm even hoping it's not a cash flow, it's just a budget authority issue, because we do expect program savings. So in order to fully appropriate positions, we have to anticipate some vacancy savings for cash flow. So I'm anticipating the need for 1 year, just while the revenue comes in, potentially needing this budget authority from the general fund, hoping not to actually need the transfer.
Member Dixon, I assume you have a follow-up.
No, it's not a follow-up. Well, it is a follow-up. It's a statement, not a question. I appreciate it because when I read the language in the explanatory statement, I thought it meant it was a fund just to restore the funding that would be cut. And what it is a fund to consolidate all of those 3 programs under one fund. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Thank you.
While restoring and adding to those programs. Member Curtis.
So I think this is what I was trying to get at earlier. So the new fund that we're creating from monies from the levy, if it passes, will be enhanced with other general fund monies, not just the levy, those specific property tax monies. Does that make sense?
So I'm not going to use the word enhance, but program revenues related to Parks and Recreation, the Senior Center, and the library will go with those programs into the local option levy fund. We're not going to retain those revenues in the general fund.
If I might ask the question then, and it might help Member Curtis, will there be general fund dollars, and I'm not talking about cash flow or budget appropriation, will there be general fund dollars spent on library, Parks and Rec, or senior or center 55 plus or 50 plus?
Our intent is no.
Does that help answer your question?
Say the question again, sorry, I was looking at something else.
So there will be no general fund dollars allocated for support of library, Parks and Rec, or Center 50 plus. Getting back to Member Dixon's point, the dollars that are allocated for those general fund dollars that are allocated to those programs now will be available to reallocate, and they've identified throughout this process several positions that would be restored by reallocating those general fund dollars. Did I say that correctly, Josh?
Yes, that is correct.
I understand that, yeah.
Member Teigen.
I think the other key point to remember is that, and I'm going to use some really round numbers, is that these are, it's a $15 million program, but it's really a $20 million program because they also collect $5 million in operating fees. And the other part is that those collections for renting the softball field, for being part of CCRLS, instead of going into the general fund, those are going to go into the levy fund. So they fully fund those 3 operations.
Absolutely, yes.
Good point, Member Teigen. Thank you. Are there other? We don't have a motion. We're still asking staff questions. Just trying to figure out where I am. Are there other questions for staff on this results area? Seeing none, may I have a motion to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 welcoming and livable community result area budget.
I move to recommend the City of Salem's fiscal year 2026 welcoming and livability community result area budget.
I'll second that.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Cohen and a second from Member Nishioka. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Member Manville.
Just explaining my no, I totally support this, but I think it's grossly inadequate.
I hope you don't take offense to this. That was remarkably short. Vice Chair Cohen.
Thank you, Chair. I will support this motion, but it is with a heavy heart. I know it might not come across the way I've spoken before, but I truly do love and utilize the library, love and utilize our parks. When I had to tell my children that, you know, the library, especially as summer is coming up in a month and a half, library will not be open or will be shorter operational hours if the levy doesn't pass. And her beloved soccer camp and track camp would not be available this year, or the splash pads, she started crying. And so I know there are many people throughout this community that depend on the library for air conditioning when it's really hot, depend on the services that are provided there to support all sorts of things beyond just reading books. Salem's a great place. It really is. I've lived everywhere from Hawaii to Norfolk, Virginia. So when I say Salem is a great place to live, I've been to places that are great as well. And I will vote aye on this motion with a heavy heart and the hope that people will vote for this upcoming May election on the 20th. Hopefully before that, turn in your ballots right now in support of the levy for the city. Thank you.
Other comments or questions? I'm not seeing any. I would just say that I concur. This is a horrible position that we're being placed in. I remain frustrated with those in the community over the last several years that have tried to convince people that we have an expenditure problem and not a revenue problem. I mean, we're now seeing the problem that we do have. And that there are simply not sufficient revenues to provide the services that this community needs and deserves. And we're having to make some very difficult choices. All right, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
I heard 3 nays. Do you want to do a roll call, or are you go? Oh, we're going to go ahead and do a roll call.
Okay, I guess just raise your hand if you're a nay.
I had Manville, Curtis, and we have 4. Sorry.
4 nays. Okay, motion passes.
All right, thank you. The Budget Committee has set aside time for public comment to address items not on the agenda. Is there anyone here that would like to speak to the Budget Committee on an item that is not on tonight's agenda? I do not see any. I do note, however, that Member Curtis wished to have a few moments on the floor at this time.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that I have not put in an application to renew my position as a member of the Budget Committee for the next 3 years. I'd be 74 by the time I finish those 3 years, so you probably don't, want me on there anyway. But it's been amazing, and it's just been so great to work with thoughtful people that have differing opinions, but we all basically want the same thing, which is a great Salem, and we have different ideas on how to get there. But we're always able to discuss that in a cordial and intelligent way. My career was 30 years in state government, and I didn't know hardly anything about Salem. I was just trying to keep my head above water and raise my kids, and I traveled a lot for one of my jobs, and I was busy, 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 and it's just been delightful to learn about Salem and to get to know some of the staff. Every chance I have, I say that we have the best staff I've encountered, and all those years in state government, we had some good staff, but really this city has some amazing people. So I'm going to miss all of you, but hopefully I'll come back after May 20th, and we'll be able to adopt a budget recommendation that's much more positive than this one. So just thanks, everybody.
Member Brown, it is with a heavy heart that it's been this long into the meeting before we've been able to hear from you.
Thank you. No, I just want to publicly say thank you for your service. We do realize that this particular committee, out of all other committees in the city, it requires a lot of time, a lot of brain energy, and just want to say we appreciate the opportunity that you are a thought partner with us. And so seeing this work and being a part of it, it's not easy. And so for the past 3 years, knowing that you've leaned in and continue to lean in, we just want to say thank you.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Member Nishioka.
I too would like to thank everybody, and hopefully we will be back here on the 28th, and I'll thank you again. So appreciate not only all the staff time, but all of the members of this committee and all of their very emotional process that we all have to go through. And I respect everyone's opinions, and I appreciate the willingness to bring those forward. I also want to let you know that there's some cakes up there that I brought to share, and I would encourage you to take a piece on your way out.
Is that regardless of how they plan to vote on May 20th? All right, the mayor had some comments. Didn't see anybody motion.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Allen. Thank you for jumping into the role and doing a fine job, sir. And to Member Cohen for vice chairing like a champ. Thank you for that. Also, to all committee members, I just want to say thank you. Your time is incredibly valuable, and the fact that you spend it, some of it here, is a really big deal for the sake of your community. So I thank you for that. I thank you for bringing your wisdom and your knowledge. It's a great learning ground. There's no doubt about it. And each of our perspectives adds something. So thank you for that. These conversations aren't always easy or comfortable, and yet you have shown up with latitude and grace for one another. And that's incredibly important and worth acknowledging. I was encouraged this year by the quarterly reporting we received. I felt that that was progress in this effort. And the 2 additional meetings to go over the forecasting that we had before the end of the year, that was progress. The forecasting that examination that took place and the efficiency that took place was also helpful in education, in terms of education, and the more we do to make this process visible, not only to us, but to the community, the better. My hope is that next year, in budget preparations will be even more productive and fruitful. I'm also hopeful, pardon me, I had to write around the corner. I'm hopeful that with each new day, we can be making progress toward less crisis and more balance when it comes to livability. So thank you very much for your service.
All right. Before we adjourn this evening, the next meetings related to the fiscal year 2026 budget will occur as follows. We are all very hopeful that we will reassemble on May 28th for City and Urban Renewal Area Budget Committee. And then, regardless, on June 9th, the Budget and State Revenue Sharing public hearing will be held at the City Council meeting. And then on Monday, June 23rd, the fiscal year 2026 budget and CIP adoption by City Council. Is there any other business for the Budget Committee this evening? Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing.
I forgot to add, vote yes on the levy.
Seeing none, we are adjourned.